Many people walk into a cathedral and see only stone, glass, and towering walls. They notice the size, the height, the way the light filters through stained glass. But beneath all that beauty, there's something hidden. Shapes, patterns, and proportions carefully planned centuries ago. Geometry so precise it connects earth and sky, body and spirit, the human and the divine. This isn't just about architecture. It's about how these spaces make you feel and why they've inspired awe for nearly 1,000 years. Let's step inside and uncover the secret language written in stone. In the centuries before Gothic cathedrals rose across Europe, the continent looked very different. After the fall of the Roman Empire, there was no single power to hold the region together. Many small kingdoms and local rulers fought for control. Roads fell into disrepair, trade slowed, and cities shrank. Most people lived in rural villages, growing food and surviving under the protection of local lords. The church became one of the few stable forces during this time. Monasteries spread across Europe, acting as centers of learning and spiritual life. Monks copied manuscripts, taught the faith, and preserved fragments of ancient knowledge, while much of the continent remained divided. Early medieval churches reflected this uncertain world. Romanesque buildings were solid and heavy, built with thick stone walls and small windows. They looked more like fortresses than places of worship. These structures gave a sense of safety and permanence. Their interiors were dark, with narrow spaces and limited light. The style worked well for the time because it was simple and sturdy, but it also limited what builders could do. Walls had to be thick to support the weight of stone roofs, which meant windows had to stay small. As a result, these churches felt enclosed and dim, leaving little room for artistic expression or a feeling of openness. During the 12th century, Europe began to change. A rise in trade brought new wealth to cities. Universities appeared, bringing a fresh wave of learning, known as the 12th century Renaissance. Scholars translated texts from the Islamic world and ancient Greece, which introduced Europeans to new ideas in philosophy, science, and mathematics. The Crusades also opened up contact with other cultures. Through Spain and the Eastern Mediterranean, Europeans encountered advanced knowledge in architecture and engineering. This exchange of ideas sparked innovation and gave builders the tools to imagine new kinds of structures. These changes led to the birth of Gothic architecture. Builders introduced three key features: the pointed arch, the ribbed vault, and the flying buttress. The pointed arch replaced the rounded Romanesque arch. It directed weight more efficiently, which allowed builders to reach greater heights. Ribbed vaults supported the ceilings while reducing the weight pressing down on the walls. Flying buttresses moved the structural burden outward, transferring the force of the roof to external supports. Together, these elements transformed how churches could be built. With these innovations, churches could rise taller and feel more open. The walls no longer needed to be as thick, which meant architects could include larger windows. These windows filled the space with light, creating an atmosphere that felt uplifting and sacred. The light symbolized the divine, giving worshippers a sense of connection to heaven. Instead of dark and enclosed spaces, Gothic cathedrals offered vast, airy interiors, where stone seemed to reach toward the sky. This was more than a technical change. It was a shift in how people experienced their faith through architecture. One of the earliest and most influential examples of this new style was the Abbey Church of Saint-Denis near Paris. Abbot Suger, who led the abbey in the early 12th century, believed that light could bring people closer to God. He wanted a church that reflected this vision. By combining pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and external supports, Suger and his builders created a structure that was taller and brighter than anything seen before. The large stained glass windows told biblical stories while flooding the interior with colored light. Standing inside Saint-Denis, worshippers would have felt surrounded by a glow that seemed otherworldly. Suger's ideas spread quickly. Other builders saw what was possible and began to apply the same techniques to their own churches. Cathedrals across France and beyond followed this model, each pushing the limits of height and complexity. Gothic architecture became a defining feature of medieval Europe. It reflected the growing power of cities, the wealth of the church, and the intellectual energy of the time. The change from Romanesque to Gothic was not sudden, but the innovations at Saint-Denis marked a clear turning point. The world before Gothic cathedrals was one of fragmentation and uncertainty. Monasteries served as beacons of stability, while Romanesque churches provided safety through their heavy, fortress-like designs. As trade, learning, and cultural exchange grew, new possibilities emerged. The pointed arch, ribbed vault, and flying buttress gave builders the means to create structures that were not only stronger, but also filled with light and space. Saint-Denis showed what these ideas could achieve, setting the stage for centuries of remarkable architecture that would reshape the spiritual and physical landscape of Europe. Long before the first Gothic cathedrals rose in Europe, people linked numbers and shapes to ideas of balance and harmony. The ancient Greeks believed that the universe followed patterns that could be understood through mathematics. Pythagoras, a philosopher and mathematician, taught that numbers were not just for counting, but were the building blocks of reality. He and his followers saw harmony in the way numbers related to one another. The Pythagorean belief in perfect ratios shaped how they understood music, the movement of the planets, and even the design of buildings. When they built temples, they used exact proportions to reflect this sense of universal order. The Egyptians also relied on precise measurements, aligning their temples and pyramids with the stars and the sun. These early cultures treated geometry as more than a tool. It was a language that connected the physical world to the divine. As these ideas moved through time, they reached medieval Europe through ancient texts that monks and scholars preserved and translated. By the 12th century, Europe was alive with intellectual growth. Universities taught subjects that made up what was known as the quadrivium: geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. These four fields were linked by the belief that the same rules governed the heavens and the earth. A medieval scholar might study geometry not only to measure land or design buildings, but also to glimpse the order that God had built into creation. To them, a perfect circle, or a precise ratio, was a reflection of divine truth. This way of thinking shaped how people understood their world and how they expressed their faith through art and architecture. When medieval builders designed a church, they were not only creating a structure to hold worshippers. They were building a model of the universe. A cathedral was meant to reflect the harmony of creation, a place where heaven and earth met. Every measurement, every line, and every angle held meaning. The very layout of a cathedral was symbolic. The floor plan often formed the shape of a cross, a reminder of Christ's sacrifice. The central nave, where the congregation gathered, stretched from west to east, echoing the journey of the sun across the sky. This eastward orientation was deeply symbolic. The rising sun represented light, life, and resurrection. When a worshipper entered from the west and moved toward the altar in the east, it was like a spiritual journey from darkness into light. This orientation was so important that most cathedrals were built with their main axis pointing directly east. Builders took care to align the structure so that the first rays of the morning sun would shine through the windows behind the altar. This design choice connected the physical building to the rhythms of the natural world and to the ideas of rebirth and renewal central to Christian belief. It also reinforced the feeling that the cathedral was a living symbol, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. For example, a worshipper entering the building at dawn might see sunlight stream through stained glass, casting colored patterns across the stone floor. That light would not just illuminate the space, but would serve as a sign of divine presence. While most cathedrals followed this eastward pattern, some broke the rule for specific reasons. Chartres Cathedral in France is a famous example. Instead of facing due east, it is oriented slightly to the northeast. This choice was deliberate rather than a mistake. Historians have debated why the builders made this decision. Some suggest that the alignment matched a local sacred site that predated the cathedral. Others think it may have been designed to line up with a specific astronomical event, such as the rising sun on a feast day dedicated to the Virgin Mary, to whom the cathedral is dedicated. Whatever the exact reason, this exception shows how seriously builders took orientation and geometry. Even a small variation carried meaning and was never left to chance. The use of geometry in these buildings went beyond their general layout. The proportions of the walls, towers, and windows were carefully calculated to create a sense of harmony. Builders often used simple geometric shapes like circles, squares, and triangles to guide their designs. A circle might represent eternity because it has no beginning or end. A triangle could symbolize the Holy Trinity. By combining these shapes, builders could express complex ideas through the very form of the cathedral. For instance, a rose window might be based on overlapping circles, each part of a precise mathematical pattern. When sunlight passed through it, the effect was both beautiful and symbolic, a visual representation of cosmic order. This connection between geometry and the divine was not limited to the structure itself. It shaped how people experienced the space. Imagine standing in the center of a great Gothic cathedral. The soaring arches above you seem to reach endlessly upward, drawing your eyes toward heaven. The rhythmic repetition of columns and vaults creates a sense of balance and peace. Even without knowing the exact measurements, you feel the order in the space. It is a physical experience of harmony, designed to move both the mind and the spirit. The builders of these cathedrals often worked without formal blueprints. Instead, they relied on geometric principles that were passed down through training and practice. Master masons used simple tools like compasses and ropes to create precise shapes on the ground before construction began. These shapes acted as guides, ensuring that each part of the building fit into the larger design. This method allowed for remarkable accuracy without modern technology. It also reinforced the idea that the building process itself was an act of devotion. To trace a perfect circle or set out a precise angle was to participate in the divine order. Geometry also linked the cathedral to the larger world beyond its walls. In medieval thought, the universe was a vast, ordered system created by God. The cathedral mirrored this system on a smaller scale. The relationship between the parts of the building reflected the relationship between the elements of creation. In this way, entering the cathedral was like stepping into a model of the cosmos. Worshippers could see and feel the structure of the universe around them, not in abstract terms, but in stone, glass, and light. This worldview shaped every decision a builder made. Even small details carried symbolic weight. A doorway might be framed by a series of arches that grow smaller and smaller, drawing the eye inward and upward. The pattern was not only decorative, but also a visual journey toward the sacred space within. A tower might rise in stages, each level carefully proportioned to reflect the order of the heavens. These choices were subtle yet powerful, guiding the experience of anyone who entered the space. Sacred geometry gave meaning to the stones and mortar of the cathedral. It turned architecture into a form of worship, where the very act of building expressed belief. Through precise proportions and careful orientation, medieval builders created spaces that spoke of harmony, balance, and divine presence. Whether aligned perfectly to the east or, like Chartres, turned slightly to match a local tradition or celestial event, these structures showed that nothing was left to chance. Each line and angle was part of a larger vision, one that connected the human world to the eternal. Medieval builders believed that numbers and shapes carried spiritual meaning. They used geometry not only to make buildings stable, but also to give them deeper symbolic power. One of the most important mathematical ideas they worked with was the golden ratio, often called phi. The golden ratio appears when a line is divided so that the smaller part relates to the larger part in the same way the larger part relates to the whole. This creates a proportion that repeats in nature, such as in shells, flowers, and even the shape of the human body. For medieval thinkers, this pattern suggested divine order, a hidden structure built into creation itself. When they used the golden ratio in a cathedral, they were not only making a pleasing design, but also reflecting the harmony they believed God had placed in the universe. Cathedral builders applied the golden ratio to many parts of their designs. They shaped arches so that the curve followed these special proportions. They laid out windows and doorways in golden rectangles, a shape whose sides matched the ratio exactly. Even the overall floor plan of some cathedrals was based on these numbers. This was not just a matter of mathematics, but of meaning. To walk through a space built on such proportions was to move through a world shaped by divine logic. Notre-Dame de Paris shows this clearly. The western facade, with its 3 great portals, is framed by a series of golden rectangles. Each layer of the design fits neatly into this pattern, creating balance and unity. The northern rose window also displays perfect phi proportions. Its circular form is divided into segments that reflect the same ratio, so when light pours through the stained glass, it carries both beauty and symbolic precision. Alongside numbers, builders used simple geometric shapes to express spiritual truths. The circle held special power because it has no beginning and no end. It symbolized eternity and divine perfection. This is why many sacred spaces include circular forms. Domes rise as perfect circles over altars. Rose windows use overlapping circles to create intricate designs that seem infinite. Even the placement of columns or the layout of a courtyard might echo the circle's endless flow. The triangle carried a different meaning. With its 3 points, it represented the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Triangular shapes appeared in roof gables, window tracery, and the arrangement of buttresses. These forms reminded worshippers of the central mystery of Christian faith, built right into the structure around them. Chartres Cathedral in France offers a rich example of how these shapes work together. Its design includes a repeating pattern known as the vesica piscis, which comes from 2 overlapping circles. The space where the circles meet forms a pointed oval, a shape used in windows, arches, and decorative carvings throughout the cathedral. This pattern symbolized unity and balance, showing how separate elements could join into a harmonious whole. Inside Chartres, the floor contains a large circular labyrinth. This labyrinth was not a puzzle or a maze, but a symbolic path. Pilgrims would walk its winding route as a spiritual exercise. During the Crusades, when travel to the Holy Land was dangerous or impossible, walking the labyrinth could serve as a substitute for a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Each step represented progress on a journey of faith. The path doubled back on itself many times, forcing the walker to slow down and reflect. In this way, the labyrinth became a form of moving meditation, a physical act of devotion built into the very stones of the cathedral floor. The labyrinth at Chartres is striking in its size and precision. It measures 12.89 meters across, filling much of the nave's width. Its design follows strict geometric rules, with 11 circuits leading toward a central rosette. This careful layout mirrors the idea of a spiritual journey that is both ordered and challenging. The pilgrim does not move in a straight line, but follows a complex path that eventually leads to the center. In this design, geometry and spirituality merge. The act of walking becomes a living symbol of life's twists and turns, as well as the ultimate goal of union with the divine. Rose windows brought these ideas into the realm of light and color. These large circular windows were not only decorative, but deeply symbolic. The circle itself carried meanings of eternity and perfection, while the radiating design suggested the sun, a symbol of divine illumination. From the center, patterns spread outward like the spokes of a wheel, representing the cosmic order flowing from God. As sunlight passed through the stained glass, it transformed into colored beams that filled the interior with a shifting glow. This play of light was not just beautiful, it was a visual sign of the divine presence, turning stone walls into living symbols. The design of a rose window reflected the medieval understanding of beauty. The philosopher Thomas Aquinas described 3 qualities that defined true beauty: integritas, consonantia, and claritas. Integritas meant wholeness, the sense that something was complete and undivided. In a rose window, this appeared in the overall circular form, which bound all parts together into a single shape. Consonantia referred to harmony, the pleasing relationship between different elements. The balanced arrangement of tracery, glass panels, and colors created this sense of harmony. Claritas, or radiance, was the glow that came from within. In the context of a cathedral, claritas was literal as well as symbolic. The stained glass shone with actual light, while also representing spiritual truth shining into the world. Notre Dame's northern rose window shows these ideas at their height. Its central image radiates outward through layers of intricate tracery, each part carefully measured to fit into the whole. The geometry is exact, yet the effect feels alive. As the sun moves across the sky, the window changes, casting different patterns of light and shadow. This constant motion reminds viewers that divine truth is both unchanging and ever-present. The same principles appear at Chartres, where multiple rose windows fill the cathedral with light. Their designs use overlapping circles, triangles, and other shapes to weave together spiritual and cosmic themes. The result is both a work of art and a statement of faith made visible. These elements, the golden ratio, the circle, the triangle, the labyrinth, and the rose window, work together to shape the experience of a medieval cathedral. Each carried layers of meaning that went beyond their physical forms. A visitor to these spaces did not need to understand the exact mathematics to feel their effect. Walking the labyrinth, standing beneath a rose window, or moving through a hall built on golden proportions was an encounter with order and mystery at the same time. Through stone and glass, builders created spaces that mirrored the structure of the universe and offered worshippers a path toward the divine. Fractals are patterns that repeat themselves at different scales. They appear everywhere in nature. A snowflake shows its basic shape whether you look at it under a microscope or see it with the naked eye. A tree branches in a similar way. The main trunk splits into large branches, which split into smaller ones, and those split again, repeating the same pattern as you move outward. Rivers form networks where smaller streams feed into larger ones in a similar repeating design. Even seashells follow this principle as their spirals grow outward in precise ratios. The key idea is self-similarity, meaning that the same structure appears again and again, no matter how closely you examine it. Fractals can seem infinitely complex, yet they are built from simple rules that repeat over and over. In the natural world, these patterns arise because of growth and flow. A plant grows by dividing, and the same rules shape each new part of it. Water moves downhill, and the same forces guide every fork in the stream. These processes create beauty without anyone planning it. When people encounter fractals in nature, they often feel a sense of harmony because the repetition is both predictable and endlessly varied. The human mind recognizes the pattern, but never sees exactly the same form twice. This combination of order and surprise can be calming and even spiritual. It explains why a forest or a coastline can hold our attention so completely. For centuries, Gothic cathedrals have inspired a similar feeling. Standing inside one of these great buildings, you see soaring arches, repeating columns, and layers of decoration that seem to stretch toward infinity. Until recently, most historians explain this effect through symmetry and proportion. But a study by Spanish researchers Rafael Samper and Carlos Herrera revealed something deeper. They analyzed 20 Gothic cathedrals in France using modern mathematical tools. They measured the shapes of arches, windows, towers, and even the layouts of entire buildings. What they found was surprising. Many of these structures contain fractal patterns, just like those found in nature. Samper and Herrera discovered that the same basic shapes repeat at different scales throughout a cathedral. An arch over a doorway has the same curve as a larger arch inside the nave, and that larger arch echoes the form of the vault high above. The pattern repeats again in the outline of the towers on the facade. This self-similarity gives the building a sense of unity while also making it feel endlessly detailed. The researchers compared this to looking at a fern leaf. Each small frond resembles the whole plant, so when you move closer or step back, the pattern continues to reveal itself. One of their case studies was Notre-Dame de Paris. At first glance, Its western facade appears to be a set of balanced shapes: three portals at the bottom, a row of statues, a large rose window, and twin towers rising above. But when Samper and Herrera measured these elements, they found repeating ratios and curves linking each level to the others. The shapes of the small decorative arches above the portals match the larger arches that frame the rose window. The towers themselves echo the outlines of the windows and doorways below. Even the tracery in the rose window reflects patterns found in other parts of the facade. This repetition creates a rhythm that draws the eye upward, making the whole structure feel alive. Chartres Cathedral showed similar results. Its layout is complex, with multiple chapels radiating from the main apse and a labyrinth set into the floor. Despite this complexity, the researchers found repeating geometric forms. The same proportions that shape the small chapels also appear in the central nave and in the grand arches of the transept. The rose windows repeat these ratios again, their radiating designs mirroring the branching paths of the floor plan. This creates a sense of coherence. Even though the building has many parts, they feel connected because the same rules shape them all. Walking through Chartres, you experience this without needing to measure anything. The repeating forms guide your eye and give you a feeling of movement and growth. Like walking through a forest, your every tree belongs to the same pattern. Strasbourg Cathedral provided another striking example. Its towering spire, once the tallest structure in Europe, is built from layers of repeating shapes. The base of the spire has large open arches. Above them are smaller arches, and above those, smaller ones still. As you look higher, the pattern continues until the forms are too small to see clearly. This creates the impression of infinite complexity. The researchers compared it to looking at a snowflake or a branching river system. No single part of the spire stands alone. Each is a variation of the same basic design, scaled up or down. These findings suggest that Gothic builders were using fractal principles long before modern mathematics described them. The masons and architects did not have equations to guide their work, but they understood these patterns intuitively. They observed similar forms in nature and in earlier buildings, then repeated them in their own designs. This approach allowed them to create structures that felt organic rather than mechanical. The buildings grow upward and outward like living things, even though they are made of stone. Fractals also help explain why Gothic cathedrals feel both immense and intimate. When you enter one of these spaces, you are struck by the scale. The ceilings rise far above you, and the vast interior seems to stretch endlessly. At the same time, your attention is drawn to small details. The carving on a column, the pattern in a window, the curve of a doorway. Each detail reflects the whole, so you can focus on any level and still feel connected to the larger structure. This is the same experience you have when looking at a tree or a coastline. Whether you see the whole landscape or a single branch, the pattern continues. Samper and Herrera's research shows that this effect was not an accident. By repeating shapes at different scales, Gothic builders tapped into a principle that resonates deeply with human perception. Our minds respond to fractals because they mirror the structures we see in the natural world. A cathedral built on these patterns feels alive because it echoes the forms of living things. The repetition creates harmony, while the variations keep the design from becoming dull or predictable. This discovery changes how we understand Gothic architecture. It shows that medieval builders were not only skilled craftsmen, but also keen observers of the world around them. They took inspiration from nature and translated it into stone. Even without the language of modern mathematics, they created buildings that embody the same principles scientists now find in snowflakes, rivers, and seashells. The cathedrals stand as proof that human creativity and natural order are deeply connected. In the study of Gothic architecture, the tall, pointed steeples that rise above cathedrals have always captured attention. These soaring structures are among the most recognizable features of the medieval skyline. For centuries, people admired their beauty, but never fully understood the system behind their design. This changed when Charles Zisi began an ambitious study that would reveal a hidden code. Zisi examined more than 500 cathedral steeples across Europe. He measured their heights, angles, and proportions with precise tools and compared his data across regions and centuries. What he found was striking. These steeples did not grow from random inspiration or isolated choices by individual builders. Instead, they followed a consistent pattern based on the golden ratio, the same mathematical relationship that appears in the human body, natural growth, and earlier cathedral designs. Zisi's research showed that the steeples fell into 6 distinct families. Each family was defined by proportions that reflected different powers of the golden ratio, also known as phi. For example, one group used the base ratio of phi itself, while another used phi squared, and so on. This created a hierarchy of designs, with each family showing a slightly different relationship between the width of the base and the height of the spire. These were not rough approximations. The measurements matched too closely to be coincidence. Zisi concluded that medieval builders were following a systematic design code, a set of rules that guided their work. This code seems to have been passed down through generations of masons and architects. Over time, especially after the Gothic period ended, the knowledge was lost. Later builders still constructed tall towers and spires, but without the same unifying structure. The result was a shift away from the precise harmony seen in earlier centuries. Understanding why this matters requires looking at what steeples represent. In a physical sense, a steeple serves as a marker. It can be seen from far away, guiding travelers to the church or town center. In a spiritual sense, it does much more. The steeple draws the eye upward, pointing toward heaven. It acts as a visual bridge between the earth and the divine. In the medieval imagination, this connection was powerful. The very shape of the steeple suggested aspiration, the human desire to reach beyond the ordinary. It was not simply decoration or a feat of engineering. It was a symbol of faith made solid in stone and timber. Some thinkers have described steeples as spiritual antennas. This idea comes from the way their narrow, tapering form seems to gather and direct energy. Just as a bell tower carries sound across great distances, a steeple carries meaning. When sunlight strikes its highest point, or when fog wraps around it on a cold morning, the effect is both practical and poetic. The builders wanted people to look up and feel connected to something greater than themselves. Every line and angle contributed to this sense of elevation, both physical and spiritual. Zisi's discovery suggests that the symbolic power of steeples was enhanced by their precise proportions. The golden ratio has long been associated with beauty and harmony. When people see it, they may not recognize it consciously, but they respond to it instinctively. A steeple built according to this ratio does more than stand tall. It resonates with the same patterns found in nature and the human body. This resonance creates a feeling of balance and rightness, making the structure seem both majestic and approachable. By following the code, medieval builders ensured that their steeples would speak to viewers on a deep, even subconscious level. A comparison between 2 famous cathedrals shows how this works in practice. Reims Cathedral in France has a single massive steeple that rises from the center of its facade. Its proportions fit neatly into one of Zisi's 6 families. The base of the tower relates to its height through the golden ratio, and each stage of the structure builds on this foundation. The transition from the wide, solid base to the narrow, pointed tip happens in a series of carefully measured steps. This creates a smooth, visual flow. The eye moves upward naturally, guided by the rhythm of the design. Even though the steeple is huge, it feels balanced, as if it grew organically from the building below. Milan Cathedral in Italy offers a striking contrast. Its roof bristles with dozens of spires, each tall and ornate. These spires were built later, during a time when the original Gothic methods were fading. They are impressive in scale and detail, but they lack the consistent proportions seen at Reims. Some spires are narrow and elongated, while others are shorter and bulkier. The overall effect is dramatic but less unified. The roofline becomes a forest of towers rather than a single, harmonious statement. According to Zeiss's analysis, the Milan spires do not fit into the golden steeple code. This difference helps explain why Reims and similar cathedrals convey a sense of calm majesty, while Milan's roof feels more chaotic, despite its beauty. Consider standing at the base of Reims Cathedral and looking up at its central steeple. The structure seems to draw you in and lift your gaze at the same time. You may not be able to name the ratios at work, but you feel their presence. Now, imagine standing in Milan Square, surrounded by many spires competing for attention. The experience is awe-inspiring, yet your eye jumps from one tower to another without a clear path to follow. In one case, geometry guides your perception toward a single point of focus. In the other, the lack of a unifying code leaves you with a sense of grandeur, but also confusion. Zeiss's findings suggest that medieval builders were not only creating symbols, but also solving practical problems. A steeple must withstand strong winds and the weight of its own materials. By using specific ratios, builders could distribute forces evenly, making the structure more stable. The golden ratio may have provided both aesthetic harmony and structural strength. This dual purpose would explain why the code endured for so long. It worked on multiple levels, serving both the eye and the stone. The loss of this knowledge after the Gothic era reflects changes in society. As new architectural styles emerged, such as Renaissance and Baroque, the focus shifted to different forms of beauty. Builders relied more on written plans and less on oral traditions. Over time, the practical and symbolic wisdom embedded in the Golden Steeple Code faded away. Zeiss's work brings it back into view, showing that what seemed like intuition was actually a sophisticated system. The study of steeples reveals how deeply medieval architecture combined mathematics, faith, and craftsmanship. Each spire was part of a network of meanings, connecting the local community to the larger cosmos. When viewed through Zeiss's lens, these towers are not just impressive landmarks. They are messages written in stone, using the language of geometry to speak across centuries. In the Middle Ages, education was shaped by a framework known as the quadrivium. This system came from ancient Greek thought and focused on 4 interconnected disciplines: geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. These subjects were seen as ways to understand the order of the universe. Arithmetic studied numbers in the abstract. Geometry explored numbers in space, as seen in shapes and proportions. Music dealt with numbers in time, revealed through rhythm and harmony. Astronomy extended these ideas to the heavens, where the movement of stars and planets followed predictable patterns. Together, the quadrivium gave students a unified way to think about the world, blending mathematics, art, and spirituality. For medieval builders, these 4 arts were not separate. They believed the same mathematical truths ran through all creation. When they designed cathedrals, they were not just making physical spaces. They were expressing these universal patterns in stone. The walls, towers, and windows reflected geometric principles, while the overall proportions of the building followed musical ratios. In this sense, a cathedral was like a frozen piece of music. Instead of hearing harmony with the ears, visitors experienced it with their eyes and bodies as they moved through the space. Medieval music theory was based on simple numerical relationships. The octave, the most basic musical interval, had a ratio of 2 to 1. A perfect fifth was 3 to 2. A perfect fourth was 4 to 3, and a whole tone was 9 to 8. These ratios were not arbitrary. They described natural harmonics found in the vibrations of strings and the human voice. Musicians understood that these intervals felt pleasing because they reflected fundamental relationships in nature. Builders applied the same logic to architecture. If a certain set of proportions created harmony in sound, it could also create harmony in space. By shaping a building around these numbers, they believed they were tuning it to the same cosmic order that governed music and the stars. Imagine standing inside a cathedral nave designed using the ratio of 9:8. The relationship between the width of the aisles and the height of the vaults might match this musical interval, even without knowing the math. You would feel the balance. Just as two notes in harmony blend into a pleasing chord, the parts of the building would blend into a unified whole. The result would not only be visually satisfying, but also spiritually meaningful. To the medieval mind, this harmony was a sign of divine order. The building itself became an instrument of worship. The connection between architecture and music was not only symbolic. Many cathedrals were literal centers of sound. Their long naves and high ceilings amplified the voices of choirs and the notes of organs. The shape of the space affected how sound traveled. Builders understood this through experience, even if they did not have modern acoustic science. A well-designed cathedral could make a single voice resonate through the entire structure. This physical effect reinforced the link between the visual and the auditory. The same ratios that shaped the structure also shaped the music performed within it. One remarkable example of this relationship can be seen in the Tortosa Cathedral in Spain. Its apse, the semicircular or polygonal space at the east end of the building, has an unusual seven-sided design. Most cathedral apses are either circular or five-sided, but the builders at Tortosa chose a heptagon. At first glance, this seems purely decorative. But researchers have found that the seven-sided plan relates to specific musical ideas. When they measured the angles and proportions of the apse, they discovered that they match intervals used in medieval music theory. Each side of the heptagon corresponds to a step in a scale, creating a direct link between the building's shape and musical harmony. The choice of seven sides may also have symbolic meaning. In Christian thought, the number 7 represents completeness. There are 7 days of creation, 7 sacraments, and 7 virtues. By combining this symbolism with precise mathematical ratios, the builders turned the apse into a visual hymn. When worshippers gathered there, they were surrounded by a structure that embodied the harmony of both faith and mathematics. This was not just metaphorical. The sound of chanting monks or a choir singing plainsong would interact with the geometry of the space. The music would resonate differently depending on where it was sung, blending with the proportions of the architecture itself. The builders of Tortosa were not unique in their approach. Across Europe, cathedral designs often incorporated musical thinking. For example, some architects planned the spacing of columns according to the same ratios used to tune instruments. A series of arches might progress like a musical scale, with each span representing a different note. The relationship between the nave, the transept, and the choir could mirror the structure of a melody. These patterns were subtle. A visitor might not consciously notice them, but they shape the overall experience. Just as a listener can feel the difference between harmonious and discordant music, a worshipper could feel the harmony of a well-proportioned building. This blending of music and architecture reflects the medieval view that all knowledge was connected. To the builders, there was no sharp divide between art and science. Geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy were different languages describing the same truth. A cathedral brought these languages together. Its layout followed geometric rules. Its measurements embodied numerical relationships. Its spaces enhanced sound and echoed with song. Its alignment with the rising sun tied it to the movements of the heavens. In this way, the building became a physical model of the cosmos. Consider how this might have felt to someone entering Tortosa Cathedral in the Middle Ages. As they walked through the doors, they would have seen the seven-sided apse glowing with morning light. The proportions of the space would guide their steps without them realizing it. The chant of the choir would rise and fall, interacting with the walls and vaults in ways that seemed almost magical. The worshipper would not have needed to understand the numbers behind the design. They would simply feel the harmony, both visually and audibly. Every element of the experience would reinforce the sense of being part of a greater order. The use of musical ratios in architecture also served a practical purpose. Just as tuning a musical instrument requires precision, so does building a stable structure. By relying on simple, whole number ratios, builders could ensure that forces were evenly distributed. A miscalculated vault might collapse, but a design based on reliable proportions would stand for centuries. This practical benefit likely reinforced the spiritual meaning. When a building stood strong and sounded beautiful, it was proof that the same mathematical truths governed both matter and spirit. The connection between music, math, and architecture shows the depth of medieval craftsmanship. Builders were not working blindly or relying only on tradition. They were applying a sophisticated understanding of how numbers shape the world. Their cathedrals were not just places of worship, but also demonstrations of knowledge. In their stones, arches, and vaults, we can still see the harmony they sought to capture. By linking geometry and sound, they created spaces that continue to move people, even when the original ideas behind them are no longer widely known. The great cathedrals of Europe were not only feats of engineering, but also the result of generations of skilled workers who saw their craft as a spiritual path. At the heart of this effort were the master masons. These men were both architects and leaders, responsible for turning vision into stone. They began as apprentices, learning basic skills like cutting blocks and shaping mortar. Over time, through years of hard work and careful observation, they advanced to journeymen and finally masters. This system of training was strict because the knowledge they carried was more than technical. It included symbolic meanings, sacred geometry, and ways of thinking that connected the physical building to spiritual truths. The Masons organized themselves into guilds. These were not casual groups, but tightly knit communities, bound by oaths and rituals. Membership was earned through skill and trust. A Mason could travel to different building sites and be recognized by other guild members through secret signs and handshakes. This secrecy protected their methods from outsiders and preserved the sacred aspects of their craft. A design might look like simple lines on parchment to a stranger, but to a master mason, it contained layers of meaning. Measurements were not just practical numbers. They were expressions of divine order, passed down carefully from one generation to the next. The guild served as a living library, holding the wisdom that shaped each cathedral. For the Masons, building a cathedral was more than a job. It was an act of devotion. Every stone placed, every arch raised, was part of a larger spiritual journey. The work demanded precision and patience, but it also required a certain state of mind. To cut a perfect block or carve a delicate tracery was to align oneself with the harmony of creation. The building site itself was a kind of monastery, where labor became prayer. This sense of purpose gave the workers strength during projects that often lasted decades or even centuries. A mason might spend his whole life working on one cathedral, knowing he would never see it completed, yet believing his contribution was part of something eternal. Many cathedrals were not built on random plots of land. The choice of location mattered deeply. Often, the site had been sacred long before Christianity arrived. In many cases, the new church rose where a pagan temple or ancient gathering place once stood. These locations were thought to hold special energy. Ancient cultures recognized certain places where the earth seemed to speak more strongly, where natural forces gathered in ways that people could feel but not fully explain. These forces were sometimes called telluric currents, subtle flows of energy beneath the ground. Builders believed that aligning a cathedral with these currents could enhance its spiritual power. The placement of the altar, the orientation of the walls, and even the depth of the foundations were chosen with this in mind. This practice, known as geomancy, treated the land itself as part of the sacred design. Just as geometry shaped the stones above, the invisible lines of energy below guided the overall plan. The cathedral became a meeting point between heaven and earth, linking divine light from above with the living energy of the ground beneath. Chartres Cathedral in France offers a vivid example of this connection. Archaeological evidence suggests that the site was sacred long before the cathedral was built. Local traditions speak of a druidic temple that once stood there, a place where ancient people gathered to honor the forces of nature. Beneath the current cathedral lies a network of underground water channels. These streams create a natural hum that can still be heard in certain parts of the crypt. To the builders, These water currents were not just physical features, but signs of the land's vitality. By placing the cathedral above them, they believed they were tapping into a source of spiritual energy. The layout of Chartres reflects this understanding. Its orientation does not follow the usual strict east-west alignment. Instead, it is slightly off-center, perhaps to match the flow of the underground streams or to honor the alignment of an older sacred site. Even the famous labyrinth set into the floor may connect to these hidden forces. Walking the labyrinth would have been a way for pilgrims to physically trace the patterns of the Earth's energy, moving in harmony with both the building and the land. Imagine a mason arriving at Chartres in the early stages of construction. Before the first stone was laid, he and his fellow builders would study the site. They might observe how the sun rose and set at different times of year, or how certain stars appeared above the horizon. They would listen for the sound of the water beneath their feet and feel for subtle shifts in the ground. These observations were not superstitions, but part of a careful practice that blended observation, tradition, and intuition. Once they understood the site, they would mark out the foundations using ropes, compasses, and stakes. Every measurement was deliberate, chosen to align the cathedral with both the heavens above and the earth below. As the building rose, the masons continued to work with reverence. The hidden knowledge of their guild guided every decision. A carving on a column might carry a symbolic message known only to those initiated into the craft. A certain ratio in the height of a tower might echo the proportions of the human body or the movement of the stars. Even the sequence in which stones were placed could follow ritual patterns. To the masons, these details were not decoration. They were part of a living language that connected the physical and spiritual realms. The secrecy of the guilds has led to much speculation over the centuries. Some people see them as the ancestors of modern secret societies, while others focus on their role as guardians of sacred architecture. What is clear is that without their careful preservation of knowledge, many of the great cathedrals might never have been built. When the Gothic era ended and new styles emerged, much of this wisdom faded. Later builders relied more on written plans and less on oral tradition. The deep connection between site, structure, and symbol was gradually lost. Walking through Chartres today, you can still sense the layers of meaning embedded in its stones. The soaring vaults, the intricate carvings, and the glowing stained glass all speak to the visible artistry of the masons. But beneath your feet, in the unseen network of water and stone, there is another story. The choice of this location, the alignment of its walls, and the hidden currents below remind us that the cathedral is more than a building. It is a conversation between humans and the earth, carried out through geometry, labor, and faith. For the master masons who built it, that conversation was their life's work, a sacred practice that turned construction into a form of worship. When someone steps inside a Gothic cathedral for the first time, the experience is often overwhelming. The eye rises with the columns, follows the pointed arches, and is caught by the glow of stained glass high above. Most visitors do not know the exact proportions or the mathematical rules behind what they see, yet they feel them. The body reacts before the mind has time to think. There is a quiet sense of balance, as if every stone has been placed exactly where it should be. This is the effect of sacred geometry at work. The builders used ratios and patterns that echo those found in nature and the human body. Because these forms are so deeply familiar, people sense harmony without needing to understand why. This unconscious response is part of why Gothic cathedrals continue to inspire awe. The space feels alive because it mirrors the rhythms of life itself. Just as a forest has repeating patterns of trees and branches, the cathedral has repeating vaults, arches, and tracery. Each part reflects the whole. As a person walks through the nave, their eyes move from small details to the vast sweep of the ceiling, finding the same shapes at different scales. This creates a feeling of endlessness. Even a single column can draw the gaze upward, like a path leading into the sky. The mind may not register the geometry, but the heart responds to the order and repetition. Perfect proportions also affect the way people feel physically. When the width of a space, the height of a ceiling, and the placement of windows follow certain ratios, the body relaxes. The brain interprets these relationships as safe and pleasing, much like hearing a harmonious chord in music. By contrast, irregular or chaotic spaces can create tension. In a cathedral, the careful balance of proportions helps worshippers feel calm and centered. This was no accident. The builders wanted to create an environment that supported prayer and reflection. Even those who visit today for reasons other than faith can sense the quiet power of the design. Light plays a central role in this experience. Stained glass windows transform ordinary sunlight into a moving display of color. As the day passes, the light shifts, painting the walls and floors with patterns that seem to breathe. This constant change adds to the feeling of life within the building. The glow of the glass also softens the hard edges of the stone, blending structure and spirit. The play of light is not random. Windows are placed with precision so that at certain times of year, specific beams of sunlight fall on particular altars or images. These moments create a connection between the cycles of the natural world and the rhythms of worship. The psychological effect of this setting can be profound. Imagine a pilgrim in the Middle Ages, weary from a long journey. As they enter the cathedral, they step from the noise of the marketplace into a space filled with color and silence. The soaring height of the nave makes their own troubles feel small, while the ordered geometry offers a sense of stability. The patterns of the labyrinth on the floor, the precise shapes of the windows, and the balanced structure of the arches all work together to guide the mind inward. Even without understanding the design, the pilgrim feels lifted out of ordinary time. The building becomes a tool for transformation, turning confusion into clarity and fear into hope. Some historians have described Gothic cathedrals as cosmic engines. This image helps explain how architecture and ritual combine to create spiritual elevation. Like a machine, the cathedral has many parts, each serving a purpose. The layout channels movement, guiding worshippers from the entrance toward the altar. The acoustics amplify music and chant, filling the space with sound that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The windows filter light in ways that shape mood and focus attention. These elements work together, just as gears and levers do in a physical machine. But the product is not mechanical motion. It is transformation of the human spirit. Rituals activate this engine. A building on its own is silent, but when filled with people, music, and prayer, it comes to life. The procession of clergy down the central aisle, the rising smoke of incense, and the ringing of bells are not random events. They are carefully timed actions that interact with the space. For example, when a choir sings beneath the vaults, the sound lingers, weaving through the arches and returning as an echo. This effect makes the voices seem larger than human, as if they belong to the building itself. During a feast day, sunlight might stream through a specific window, illuminating a statue or painting at just the right moment. To those present, it would feel like a sign from heaven, though it was also the result of precise planning by the builders. The physical journey through the cathedral mirrors an inner journey. At the entrance, the space is wide and open, filled with movement and noise. As one approaches the altar, the design narrows and rises, drawing attention upward and forward. This gradual change guides the visitor from the outer world to a more focused, sacred center. Walking this path can be as meaningful as any spoken prayer. Even the act of climbing steps or circling the labyrinth becomes a form of meditation. Each movement is shaped by the architecture, which quietly teaches lessons about order, humility, and transcendence. Consider the experience of standing at the center of Chartres Cathedral's labyrinth. The winding path has brought you through many twists and turns, but now you are still. Above you, a rose window glows with colored light, its pattern radiating outward like the spokes of a wheel. The shapes in the glass echo the shapes in the floor beneath you. In that moment, you are part of a design that stretches from the ground to the sky. The building has guided you to this point, both physically and spiritually. This is the work of the cosmic engine, using geometry, light, and sound to bring the human soul into harmony with the universe. Even those who do not share the original religious beliefs of the builders can feel this effect. modern visitors often describe a sense of awe that goes beyond words. It is the same response people have when standing before a vast canyon or looking at the stars on a clear night. The cathedral captures that feeling and brings it indoors, making it accessible to anyone who enters. The harmony of its proportions speaks the universal language. It reminds us that we are part of something larger, something both ordered and mysterious. The genius of Gothic architecture lies in how it blends the visible and the invisible. The stones, glass, and timber are solid and real, yet they are arranged in ways that suggest forces we cannot see. Just as the hidden gears of a clock produce visible movement, the hidden geometry of the cathedral produces visible beauty. The experience of walking through such a space is both physical and spiritual. You feel the coolness of the stone under your hands, hear the echo of your footsteps, and see the play of light on the walls. At the same time, you sense patterns and meanings beyond what you can name. The cathedral does not simply contain these experiences, it creates them. Through its design, it becomes a bridge between the everyday world and the realm of the sacred. Modern technology has given us new ways to understand the genius of Gothic cathedral builders. For centuries, scholars studied these buildings using sketches, measurements taken by hand, and photographs. While these methods revealed a great deal, they also left many questions unanswered. The proportions of cathedrals are so intricate and precise that it is easy to miss patterns when looking with the naked eye. Recent advances in digital tools have changed this. Computer-aided design, known as CAD, and laser scanning now allow researchers to capture every detail of a cathedral in 3 dimensions. These tools provide a level of accuracy that medieval builders themselves could not have imagined. Laser scanning works by sending out pulses of light and measuring how long they take to return. This creates a point-by-point map of the structure, recording even the smallest features of the stonework. When these points are gathered together, they form a digital model of the building. With this model, researchers can rotate, zoom, and examine the cathedral from angles that would be impossible in person. CAD software then makes it possible to analyze these models in ways that reveal hidden structures. Lines, ratios, and symmetries emerge with clarity, showing patterns that may have been invisible for centuries. Robert Bork, a leading scholar in this field, has used these tools to study Gothic cathedrals in remarkable detail. His work shows that medieval builders relied on complex systems of geometry to plan their designs. At first glance, a cathedral might seem like a collection of arches, towers, and windows placed together for visual effect. Bork's research proves that every element was carefully related to the others. By overlaying geometric grids onto the scanned models, he has demonstrated how builders used circles, squares, and triangles to guide proportions. In some cases, he has uncovered evidence of changes made during construction. These adjustments show how master masons solved problems while staying true to the overall design. For example, in one study of a French cathedral, Bork discovered that the placement of the towers followed a precise geometric plan that extended far beyond the visible structure. The base of the towers aligned with ratios drawn from a single master circle, while the height of the spires matched the proportions of smaller nested circles. Without digital tools, these relationships would have been nearly impossible to detect. The accuracy of the builders is astonishing, especially when we consider that they worked with ropes, compasses, and hand tools rather than machines. The laser scans confirm what historians have long suspected. Gothic cathedrals were not just artistic achievements, but also feats of advanced mathematical thinking. This technology has also helped explain why certain spaces within cathedrals feel so harmonious. By mapping the exact dimensions of naves, aisles, and chapels, researchers have shown how builders used ratios similar to those found in music. Aisles may be spaced according to whole number relationships, like 3-2, 4-3, the same intervals that form the basis of musical harmony. Visitors respond to these ratios on a deep level, even without knowing the mathematics behind them. Modern analysis proves that this effect was intentional. The masons were, in a sense, tuning their buildings like instruments. Digital models allow researchers to test these ideas in ways that go beyond theory. For instance, sound simulations can now be run inside the virtual cathedral. These tests show how the architecture shapes music and chant. When the proportions match certain harmonic ratios, the sound travels cleanly and evenly, filling the space with resonance. If the ratios are off, echoes become muddled and uneven. This connection between geometry and sound would have been clear to the builders through experience, but now modern science can explain it in exact terms. These discoveries have practical value today. Modern architects face challenges that medieval builders never imagined, such as skyscrapers, dense urban environments, and sustainable design. Yet the principles of sacred geometry remain relevant. A building that follows clear ratios and balanced proportions still creates a sense of harmony, just as it did centuries ago. Architects can use digital tools to apply these ideas in new contexts. For example, a hospital could be designed so that its layout encourages calm and healing by echoing the same natural patterns found in Gothic cathedrals. A public square could use circular and triangular forms to create a space that feels connected to the rhythms of the surrounding city. These lessons go beyond aesthetics. Modern science has shown that the environments we live and work in affect our mental and physical health. Studies have found that people feel more relaxed and focused in spaces that follow natural patterns, such as fractals and harmonic ratios. This is the same insight medieval builders worked with intuitively. By blending science and spirituality, today's architects can design spaces that support well-being in measurable ways. The cathedral, once a purely religious structure, becomes a model for buildings that serve the whole community. Bork's research also offers a new perspective on sustainability. Gothic cathedrals were built to last for centuries. Their materials were local, their structures efficient, and their designs adaptable. Modern digital analysis reveals how these buildings distributed weight and stress through elegant geometric solutions. In an age of rapid construction and short-term planning, there is much to learn from this approach. By studying the past with modern tools, we can recover techniques that reduce waste and increase durability. Consider how a modern city might benefit from this knowledge. Imagine a new civic building designed with the same care for proportion and alignment as a Gothic cathedral. Its walls might be shaped to guide natural light deep into the interior, reducing the need for artificial lighting. Its layout might encourage movement and gathering, fostering a sense of community. Even its acoustics could be tuned for speech and music, making it a place where people feel comfortable and inspired. None of this would require copying medieval styles. Instead, it would involve applying the underlying principles in a contemporary way. The use of CAD and laser scanning has also opened possibilities for preservation. Many cathedrals are fragile after centuries of weathering and war. Digital models capture their current state in exact detail, creating a record that can be used for restoration or study. If a part of a building is damaged, the model can guide repairs with unmatched precision. This process ensures that the original proportions are maintained, even when new materials are introduced. In this sense, technology acts as a bridge between past and future, keeping the legacy of medieval builders alive. Through these tools, we see how advanced the medieval masons truly were. Their work combined art, mathematics, and spiritual vision in ways that still challenge us today. Modern science does not diminish their achievements. Instead, it reveals the depth of their knowledge and the sophistication of their methods. By studying their cathedrals with the most precise instruments we have, we gain insight into both their world and our own. These buildings remind us that architecture is more than construction. It is a language that speaks across centuries, linking the geometry of the past with the needs of the present. Gothic cathedrals are among the most remarkable creations of the human spirit. They rise from the earth like stone forests, their spires reaching toward the sky, their walls covered in sculpture and light. At first glance, they seem impossibly complex, but beneath the surface lies a hidden order. This order comes from geometry, the language through which medieval builders expressed their understanding of the universe. Geometry was more than a tool for measurement. It was a way to bring harmony into form, to show in stone what they believed about creation itself. Every arch, every window, Every step of the floor plan was part of a pattern linking the human world to something far greater. Throughout the cathedrals, these patterns appear in many ways. The golden ratio, found in seashells and flowers, shaped the proportions of towers, portals, and rose windows. Circles symbolized eternity, triangles reflected the Holy Trinity, and labyrinths represented the winding path of the soul. Fractal patterns appeared in arches and spires, repeating themselves at different scales like the branches of a tree or the veins of a leaf. These choices were not decorative alone. They were deliberate, each one meant to teach, to inspire, and to connect the visible building with invisible truths. The result is a harmony that can be felt even by those who know nothing of the mathematics behind it. The builders themselves understood their work as sacred. The master masons guarded their knowledge through guilds, passing it from teacher to student in a living chain of tradition. They worked with secrecy because they believed their craft held spiritual power. The places they built were not chosen at random. Many cathedrals stand on sites that had been sacred for centuries, sometimes millennia. Beneath these stones lie ancient temples, springs, and underground streams. The builders believed these locations held energies that could be focused through the structure above. In this way, the cathedral became a bridge between heaven and earth, drawing on forces both seen and unseen. Walking through such a space is to move through a world shaped by meaning. The body responds to the perfect proportions, even if the mind does not name them. The width of the nave, the height of the vault, the rhythm of the columns. These relationships echo the same ratios found in music and nature. Just as a chord in harmony pleases the ear, these proportions please the eye and spirit. The cathedral creates an atmosphere of balance. Visitors often describe a feeling of peace as they step inside, a sense that they have entered a place where everything fits together. This effect is not accidental. It is the result of centuries of knowledge encoded in stone. The rose window captures this harmony in a single image. Imagine standing beneath one at sunrise. The glass glows with color, each piece arranged in a perfect circle. From the center, patterns radiate outward like ripples on water. The light streaming through the window changes as clouds pass and the sun moves, making the design seem alive. If you trace the shapes carefully, you will see how they fit into geometric rules, overlapping circles, golden rectangles, and precise ratios. Even if you do not think about the math, you feel its power. The window seems both still and moving, complete and infinite. In that moment, you are part of the same pattern, connected to the builders who planned it, to the worshippers who stood there centuries ago, and to the universe itself. Modern technology has revealed how precise these designs truly are. Through laser scanning and computer models, researchers have mapped cathedrals in exact detail. They have discovered systems of geometry that run through every part of the buildings, from the largest towers to the smallest carvings. These studies confirm what the medieval builders knew in their own way, that harmony comes from repetition and proportion. Modern science now explains why these spaces feel alive. The patterns of a cathedral mirror the patterns of nature and the human body. When we walk through them, we respond instinctively, as though we are moving inside a living organism. This knowledge offers lessons for the present. Even in an age of steel and glass, the principles of sacred geometry still matter. A building does more than provide shelter. It shapes how people feel and think. When a space follows natural proportions, it supports health and well-being. When it ignores them, it can cause stress and disconnection. Architects today can draw on the same wisdom that guided the masons of the past. They can use modern tools to create spaces that are both functional and deeply human. In this way, the link between science, spirituality, and design remains unbroken. Consider how a modern city might look if these ideas were applied. Public buildings could be arranged so that their layout encourages movement and gathering, much like the flow of a cathedral nave. Parks and squares could follow the same geometric patterns found in Gothic windows, creating harmony between built and natural spaces. Even hospitals and schools could benefit, designed to foster calm and focus through careful use of proportion and light. These choices would not require copying medieval styles. They would come from understanding the same principles that once guided the builders of Chartres, Notre-Dame, and Reims. Returning to the cathedral, imagine standing once more beneath the rose window. The air is cool, the stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Above you, the glass shines like a vision of the cosmos. You begin to notice details you missed before: a carving on a column, the way the arches repeat like notes in a melody, the precise balance of light and shadow. Slowly, you realize that nothing here is random. The building itself is a message, written in a language of shape and proportion. It speaks of order, connection, and beauty. In its design, you glimpse the same patterns that shape the stars, the tides, and the growth of a tree. In that moment, the centuries between you and the builders seem to vanish. The same geometry that guided their hands now guides your eyes. You are part of a chain that stretches across time, linking past and present. The cathedral stands not only as a monument to faith, but also as a reminder of what humans can create when they seek harmony with the world around them. It is both ancient and modern, earthly and heavenly. As you leave, stepping back into the sunlight, you carry with you a sense of balance. The patterns remain in your mind, silent yet alive, connecting you to something vast and enduring. The cathedral, with all its hidden geometry, continues to serve as a bridge between heaven and earth, between the past and the unfolding present.